Very cool. All right, to our panellists. Patrick McVeigh. Patrick is practice-led, people in places with consultancy. MartinJenkins, he's got a deep experience in economic development and urban planning. He was formerly with Aotearoa, where he played a key role in advancing the circular economy work. Patrick, welcome to the stand here. And we have Matt Montgomery. Matt's Head of Innovation with Auckland Council and is leading the development of the Auckland City Smart Program. He has a background in utilising systems thinking approaches to embed sustainability and innovation. Matt, welcome to the floor. James Walker is Deputy Secretary of Partnerships and Customers at the Ministry for the Environment. James is the point man on MVeigh's circular economy work and their impact investment approach. James, welcome to you too. Now, so we want to get a better understanding of how policy, regulation, funding or hands-on leadership might play out. So Patrick, do you want to sort of come to the podium and give us a couple of minutes brief if you like?
Thanks, Phil. Just to say thank you very much to SBN and to Wasteman's for inviting me today. It's been a really great conference so far, so congratulations on the first summit and we look forward to future summits. Been really inspiring conversation today, so I've really enjoyed myself. So probably only, I guess, 3 areas I'd like to touch upon in terms of thinking about the circular economy and the role that government may or may not play in moving it forward. I think the first point that I would like to say is I think we have to think about this firstly from the point of view of us as consumers. So what sends the biggest signal to government and to the market? I think it's part of everything that we do to demand more from the products and services. And we've heard that referred to today in terms of the plastic bags, etc. So that's an important component that we should be acknowledging. And again, events like today, hearing about some of the great companies is a good way of doing that. I think the second thing, and this is where I think government starts to play a really key role, is to start thinking about the type of infrastructure that can support the development of the circular economy. So we heard this morning from Eugenie Sage some really important steps that are being taken around things like waste minimisation. But as we also heard, this is actually thinking about this more from a regenerative point of view as well. So what are the types of regulations, tax incentives and other behaviours that government can put in place to support the type of platform? And I think we can hear about some of that at both the city level and a national level. So having that infrastructure to support the circular economy, to support cradle to cradle, I think is going to be really important for the future. The third thing is government can also play a role in terms of how it changes its own behaviour. So in terms of its approach to procurement, for example, thinking about whole life costs, thinking about how do you price for the externalities, as Shamubel mentioned. That's going to be really important that we move away from a procurement model that's only looking at lowest and first price. It's actually looking at whole life costs and how we incentivise the kind of partnerships and businesses to grow. The other aspect that government's got a role to play, I think, is around providing the right type of business support at the right time, particularly around some of the business models. So I think James from Callaghan did a really good job of talking about some of the work that Callaghan is undertaking. And he made the point at the start that one of his disappointments is not many people, not many businesses still understand what Callaghan do. I think I'd extend that one step further and say when it comes to some of the things that James was talking about, even less businesses would know that Callaghan are in that space. So the right type of business support, whether it's from NZTE, from Callaghan, from private sector providers, and people being made aware of what the role of that business support program might be. And that brings me to, I guess, my final point, that is we need to continue to acknowledge and celebrate the success of those entrepreneurs and those businesses that are adopting circular economy or cradle-to-cradle processes. You heard about a number of them today. I've been hearing about some of them through the work that we did with SBN, specifically looking at Auckland and the economic value of the circular economy. But there was a lot of businesses that I hadn't heard of in New Zealand. And I think if we look out there, there's probably businesses that don't necessarily realise they're in that market segment either. So some of the things like SBN are doing around their awards program, I think that's really important as well. Using those people that are the leading edge, that are developing new business models and finding a way of celebrating and sharing what they're doing. So I think there's a number of dimensions there that I think we as government, former government, need to think more about in terms of providing the right type of platform for the economy to grow in this way in New Zealand. Thank you.
Thank you very much. All right, Matt Montgomery, come to the podium for a couple of minutes.
Thank you. I think platform is one of the useful words that you just finished on, and one of the things I can elaborate on a bit further. Unfortunately, two of the things I was going to talk about, you just talked about. So I think procurement is a huge issue that the council can play. It provides that business model, it provides that certainty for people and that incentivisation, that catalyst for change. I think upskilling is vitally critical, and in that same guise, I think collaboration is really important too. Whilst council can play a massive role and government can play a massive role, this is one of those systems problems. It is a complex problem that requires all of us to work together. And collaborating in that, in a physical sense, in a digital sense, is absolutely critical. And one of the things that we've done at Council is, with Patrick's help before he left Aotearoa, was develop a collaboration space for government incubation of technology and sustainability types of innovation. And that is deliberately trying to tackle some of these messy problems, bringing together people to share our experiences, share our knowledge, and share the opportunities so we can work together on that. And that space is physically hosted here on level 4 and called Innovate Auckland. And one of the things that we'll be looking at is the circular economy, amongst others. I think the other part that you mentioned as well is about the infrastructure that's required. One of the blockers often is councils not being able to support or enable innovation, especially when it comes to a digital sense. And the infrastructure and the innovation investment that's required in digital infrastructure is one of those things that will help unlock this. It's about understanding where resources and products and materials are in the supply chain at a given time, unlocking some of those as a service models, and enabling the sharing economy. And I think that's where council can play a catalyst role, but it's one of those sorts of areas where we would want to quickly move out the way and let industry come in and innovate in that space. So I think for me it's collaboration, it's procurement, it's innovation, and it's investment in infrastructure. I'll leave it there.
Very cool, thank you. And James Walker.
Tēnā koutou katoa, kia koutou, tēnā koutou, kei manatu mō te tai ao o e mahi ana ko James Walker toko ingoa. Hi everyone, I'm James. I'm from the Ministry for the Environment. I know you heard from Minister Sage this morning. You saw her on the screen. You have me live, a public servant, odd-staged, unplugged, and I'm going to give you a real good show. I also am deeply saddened to hear of Claire's sickness. Obviously, there is one upside, is that I can blame MB for anything and commit them to everything. So let's say procurement, let's consider that fixed. For me, in terms of central government, I think there's kind of 3 things we can do. The first thing is send a signal, the second thing is fix the system, and the third thing is get out of the way. So the first thing around sending the signal, I think there's a really big picture signal that the current government is sending right now, and I'm going to talk about the zero carbon bill to start with. The government has finished consulting on setting a zero carbon or zero greenhouse gas emissions target out to 2050. There's been discussion today about policy certainty over time and intergenerational change. So it may not have the word circular economy in it or closing the loop or cradle to grave, but this is sending a very big environmental signal to the system and the economy that we need to move away from the way we have been doing things and take the environment into account. The way we're talking about it in government at the moment and the way the current government is talking about this is that the economy is a wholly owned subsidiary of the environment, and this is not our quote, obviously. It's been around for a while, but this is the thinking that the government is shifting to, but these things take time. The second thing, specifically around circular economy, is I've been in this role since January, and we had Andrew Morley from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation visit just I think in February, and now we have this summit now. In the interim period, we've seen circular economy actually be on the title of a cabinet paper going to cabinet around how we want to frame our waste discussions in New Zealand. So this is actually a term understood by central government, or not fully understood, increasingly understood, and more importantly, believed in. The third signal, I think you're already seeing the government starting to take some steps. A couple of weeks ago, I was at the launch of the intention to ban single-use plastic bags. Some people say, well, plastic bags are just only a part of the problem, a small part of the problem. Correct, they are. But boy, do they send a signal. There's probably no environmental issue that New Zealand is more passionate about plastic bags. And when you get people thinking about something like plastic bags, they start thinking, okay, well, you've done that, what's next? I saw Kerry from Countdown walk in before, and Kerry knows this more than anyone, is that once you say, well, we're dealing with plastic bags, we're so great, and they're like, but what about all the rest of the plastic? And that's the momentum that you were talking about just before, is building that momentum through customers who are also voters, of course. In terms of fixing the system, Minister Sage talked about her work program. I think a big thing is we need to make waste, make it more expensive to waste, right? At the moment, it's cheaper to throw things out than it is to think about different ways of doing things. So the government has made a commitment that it's going to look at how it expands the levy, which is helping set the system. And that, I think, is probably one of the biggest plays that we can make. And then in terms of getting away, all the ideas are in the room, you're hearing them. Not everyone's doing it, and that's part of the momentum shift, but you are, you've got the ingenuity, and you're doing it, and that needs to be understood and heard by the rest of New Zealand and collaborated. We won't completely get out of the way, though, because when we get the waste levy goes up, we'll have some more money to invest through the Waste Minimisation Fund, and so we can start to invest in more of these ideas that you have and invest in changing the system and helping out councils as well. Why that's important is at the moment that amount of money that we're spending every year is about $14 million, and there's some recipients in the room. I see Flight Plastics here who are doing great things with PET recycling on shore in New Zealand, closing that loop here. That's incredible, so we can help kickstart some of those investments. But as I said, as that money grows out, we need to be more strategic about how we invest it. Instead of sitting back in government saying, okay, lolly scramble, what ideas are coming in? We need to have a strategy about what we need to invest in New Zealand in terms of our onshore infrastructure. Some people think the China ban is a kind of a catastrophe and what are we going to do about it? I think we're reframing that in our ministry anyway as an opportunity. It's actually time that we actually say, well, hang on a minute, is it really reasonable that some other country would take care of our waste? And if you put it like that, I don't see how you can make that argument. So for us, we're saying, well, let's use this opportunity and time to think about policies and think what we need to do here in New Zealand to take care of the situation we face now. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you. So keep those questions rolling through on Slido. I'll kick off with a couple here. This one for the whole panel. Patrick, maybe you first. And around the panel, what do you think other roles central and local government should play in New Zealand, and how will this evolve?
Well, thanks for letting me go first, so I can steal Matt's answer again. I think we've touched upon some of them here. I think it is about thinking about where are the bits of infrastructure that are missing, and where do you need to put incentives in place to actually accelerate the uptake of some of these new business models and new opportunities. I think one of the things that's a challenge for government, both locally and centrally, and I can kind of say this having spent time in local government and now sort of moved into a consultancy role, is there are so many competing priorities. And so the need to do something about transport, about schooling, about circular economy. But what you really need to do is to step back from that and take more of a systems approach that Matt's actually very strong on in terms of how Auckland Council is starting to try and think about some of these things. Because there are opportunities to create win-win. So the work that we did with SBN and with Sapere when I was at Aotearoa was talking about the economic opportunity in the circular economy. And it looked specifically at Auckland. But it identified that if we did move to a more circular economy and we really looked at things like construction and food, transport, big sort of contributing sectors in the new Auckland economy and in New Zealand more generally, there was an opportunity to generate significantly new jobs. And I know we've talked about how poor GDP is a measure, but it identified about $8 billion more of GDP that could be created in the economy by moving towards a more circular approach.
All right. Matt, do you want to have a chance at that question?
Yeah, I think, again, stealing my answers, thank you. But I think construction is probably one of those richest streams to start in terms of, it's the easiest one to sell into the council. We pay a lot of money for waste management. We suffer from a lot of waste from construction, and it both increases the productivity of the delivery of infrastructure to eliminate waste in that process, but it also creates jobs, it creates roles, it creates new products. It is not a cost to the system. In the UK, where I used to work, we eliminated waste from construction sites about 5-10 years ago on our major infrastructure projects, and it didn't cost.
So we're really lagging behind.
Yes, but it's important to say that that was in the construction. There's also the demolition phase that you need to start thinking about. So, it's not just about how you reuse those materials and you recycle them, but it's also how you use modularization so that you can actually reuse products and you standardize and you go about it in that way. But there are significant areas where we can look at in those areas, in those specific topics, where you can do incremental little parts, demonstrate benefit, collect some value, and then keep on going. The thing that James mentioned is about looking for those gaps in the system, and that requires us all to work together to understand, well, what does the system look like? Where are those parts? How things move around?
In terms of an Auckland focus, before we move on to the other things with James, in terms of a circular economy, I just want to go back to what Aotearoa said about a mana economy. When it comes to Auckland, does a circular economy benefit everyone in Auckland? Does it sort of cut down inequality? I'm just thinking, for example, in terms of, say, infrastructure. There's a big issue right now of, talking to Bike Auckland's Barbara Cuthbert, a big issue. You look out here, CBD, we've got the light paths and we've got the flash cycle infrastructure. Tell you what, go to South Auckland, not a lot going on. So that's an example of sustainable architecture for inner city Aucklanders, but not a lot for South Aucklanders. So is a circular economy for all?
I think that's a fair point and a fair question to raise. I don't think the circular economy is going to be the panacea. It has to be in step with other measures which are about incorporating social procurement, about training, upskilling, and making those opportunities available for all. A circular economy doesn't necessarily mean a just economy.
It does not mean a just economy.
It doesn't necessarily.
Well, that's not a good thing, is it?
Well, it means we have to be careful about how we develop the circular economy, how we increase and incorporate opportunities for everyone. There are fantastic opportunities there, but we can't just assume that because it's a circular economy, it will be a good economy.
Okay, that's very interesting. All right, one here. James, what role do you see MFE playing? Lead, enabler, influencer? Paul?
Thank you, Paul. I see us playing all those roles. At MFE, we're quite we've got a small but fierce ministry, but we kind of feel at the moment like it's our time in the sun at the moment. We've got opportunity abounds for us, and we're trying to look at climate change, fresh water, urban development, and obviously circular economy. So just a few little tricky problems to confront at once. But yes, I think we need to be a lead, and we need to be a voice for these issues. We have New Zealand's environmental reporting program, which we share with statistics. So we like to think of ourselves when it comes to the actual state of the environment. MFE has the single source of truth about what really is happening, and what's happening on a lot of the metrics isn't great. So we have that. We have obviously the role to advise and inform our ministers, and that's around how we can shift the system. And then we're an enabler in terms of how we can use the funds that we have to invest and kickstart circular economy type initiatives as well.
Here's another one. Can you bring up the Slido screen again? If we bring this up. This one here from Stephen. It's quite a good one, isn't it? How can we avoid the circular economy from becoming a buzzword which disappears from the mainstream in 5 years? I hope it doesn't. What do you reckon?
I think that's a good question, because this is actually I'm relatively new to this area myself, and when I first heard of it, I was like, this is genius, right? And I kind of discovered it. And then I realized actually I've been told a number of times that the concept of what it really embodies has been around for decades. It's not new. Potentially what we are seeing in New Zealand context anyway is a bit of a momentum shift, and that's what's exciting, and that's I think what we're seeing at the moment. I mean, personally, if the word goes and it changes to something else or whatever, that to me is not the point. It's actually, are we living and embodying these concepts in the way we think about our economy? People don't necessarily need to understand the term, they need to understand the substance behind it and believe it.
What do you reckon, both of you? Matt,
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. It's the principles by which the circular economy operates under, which is important. What you call it doesn't really matter so much as how it functions. And that is around that modularisation, standardisation. It's around ensuring you have no waste in the system. the word is not that important. And I think we embody the principles. It doesn't matter if the word drops out of fashion.
Right, Patrick?
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I think the only thing I would add is back to my point about showcasing what's good, showcasing the examples, because the word's less important than people understanding. So most people now understand what Uber is and how it works, and that is part of the sharing economy, which is itself part of the circular economy, and it's digitally enabled, to pick up a point from earlier as well. It doesn't really matter that people understand what that all means, but they do understand actually how do they both access Uber or become an Uber driver. Now, that's interesting in relation to Matt's previous point as well about, is that an inclusive economy? So anybody can participate and become an Uber driver.
Well, what's more important, an inclusive economy or a circular economy?
I think you're trading off, probably it's apples and pears, but it's a good example as well, because inclusive economy, living standards, prosperity, it's all the same thing. It's actually about the heart of what's that all about that's important.
Just out of interest, James, where would you like to see the waste levy set at? It's woefully low here in New Zealand, isn't it? And, as I understand, I mean, shockingly low compared to other countries. I think, UK about $140 a tonne or what have you? Where would you like to see it set?
Watch me dodge and dive that one, but...
He's a comedian. No, seriously.
No, I'll give you a serious answer. I won't give you a number, but what I'll give you is the fact that the statistic is right, that it applies to 11% of landfills and 30% of waste. So the first step is let's get coverage across all landfills. Then I think the fact of the matter is we need to do work on what that number is, and you take into account a number of situations. What's a serious number that's going to send the right signal, and how do you get there over a period of time?
So
and we don't
100 plus?
We don't have a number at the moment. We've announced, a month ago, that this is the direction of travel, and so we've got policy analysts galore throwing numbers around like left, right and centre. So when we've got a number, New Zealand will know.
Okay. Adam says, Matt, did the UK construction high recycling involve separation at source on the building site with a large number of different bins?
Yes, it did. And actually, when we first implemented, I used to work in infrastructure for a private consultancy, and when we first started implementing these sorts of requirements, construction firms would kick back and say, well, we don't have space, it's not going to work, it's going to take us more time. In the end, it saved them money, and they became the biggest proponents of it. So yes, it did involve segregating at waste, much as roadside recycling did as well. You take the burden off the council, and to respond to Paul's question there as well about producers produce, consumers consume. It frustrates me that we're passive recipients of waste in the council, and we do need to be able to influence at source. And it's not an easy question to answer there because of the unintended consequences and the knock-on impacts to businesses and to individuals. But I think we absolutely have to do that.
Some interesting one coming from out there. Nikki asks, in the circular economy context, certain materials have no place at all, polystyrene in particular. Are we likely to see a ban on polystyrene anytime soon? What do you think?
I think the underneath that, and what's important, is that when you look at the system, packaging is made up of all sorts of different materials, and you need to have a solution, end-of-life solution for each of those materials. And we've talked a lot about the system today and that being things across the supply chain. And what we need to get much better in New Zealand is coming together across central government, across industry, across council, and actually working out what materials we're going to use so we can invest in the right end-of-life solutions. So does that mean we potentially look at having standards around what packaging materials are used in New Zealand? I think that's very much a live question that we should be looking at.
Just something you said in a report, or was it a piece not so long ago, this year, Patrick, I'm quoting you as saying that you say that the speed of transition to this new economy is just too slow, and the undoubted opportunities are at risk of being left on the table. The question for policymakers is how to enable these principles and practices to be more systematically embedded in the economy and society, and what are the barriers that need to be removed or the incentives that need to be in place to facilitate the transition. So it's quite a good thought, really, and I was thinking too, I mean, there's some fantastic initiatives, examples, but to me it seems like the transition is very slow.
I mean, I think, and it's probably easier for me to say this no longer in government, I think there is a need and an opportunity to go quicker. I think, again, we've all got a role to play in that. So the point I make in that article is also about, again, the consumer demand on this, and plastic bags we talked about this morning, some of that was the push from consumers, and then the acceptance when the regulations start to change. But if you talked to people doing similar roles in, say, Vancouver or Portland, which I have done, one of the things they would say is that local government can't go quick enough because the population are demanding more and more.
Really?
So, and they would say, the quicker we go, we'll still have our public, our voters, telling us they want more.
So are we in danger of being left behind, do you think, New Zealand? New Zealand Inc. It's now the model, the circular economy is now the model for areas of policy, as I understand, in the European Union. China has passed a law for the promotion of their circular economy in 2008, so it's now part of their national 5-year planning cycle. I don't see anything like that in government.
I mean, I think other places have gone quicker, and there's an opportunity for us to catch up quickly, though. So,
Right.
as a small country, we can move quickly.
Okay. Kelly asks, what role does the primary sector, e.g. food and fibre, have in the circular economy space? New Zealand creates biological products. Can we be global leaders in that sphere?
I would very much like to encourage that. I think, by setting the procurement rules in council about what the things we want to buy, we can provide a business model and make that a reality. There's a lot of land which is used for very degrading practices. If we could turn that around with more permaculture and sustainable principles on the land side and develop that business model that allows people to do those products, and that's both through stick and carrot policies, so making it more attractive for people to not waste and making it harder for them to waste. I think that is absolutely something we should be doing.
Jen asks, should we regulate the types of packaging that can be imported into New Zealand? What do you reckon, James?
I think that goes back to the answer I gave before, is that looking at the standards of packaging we use in New Zealand needs to be part of the answer.
So is that a yes or no?
I think, that's a yes. That's part of the answer, yeah.
David asks, can Auckland Council set the requirements for end-of-life management in the building consents they issue, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. And I think we should. And I think it has to be done in step with industry. If we put too high a requirement on them initially, there will be kickback. So it has to be done in collaboration, both building skills and the knowledge and the processes that enable that to happen. But yes, that is a role that government should be playing in that space.
What are the numbers? Give us some numbers. I mean, if we liberate the circular economy to its fullest, Auckland, the report being done on this, in terms of Auckland,
Talked about 8 billion.
how much? What's the numbers?
The report, which is available through the SPN website, which was economic analysis by Sapere, talked about, I think, 8 billion in terms of additional GDP that created, and I can't recall from the top of my head how many additional jobs, but if you think about that, also in terms of how many new businesses could be created, how many entrepreneurs could be unleashed, then it is potentially very significant.
Yeah. Let's do actually just one more. We've got to move on to the other panel. What one shall we have? James, would you like to pick one?
Oh, that's awesome. Deposit legislation. Let's go with that. I think that's probably talking about container deposit schemes.
It seems so easy. Why is deposit legislation so hard to get into law? Asks Steve.
Why is it so hard to get into law? Well, I guess we're probably not at the point of putting it into law. I think the question came posed from Minister Sage as well. She hears from a lot of people who say, container deposit scheme is the answer. And then she hears from a lot of people saying, don't go near a container deposit scheme. So she said to the ministry, what do I do? So that's a question that we're actually, again, on our ginormous work plan of things with climate change and fresh water, but we are looking at whether or not that's the right solution for New Zealand. And you have to go back to first principles on that one and what's the problem we're trying to solve. And so we're going to go back there and work that through.
Very, very good. Just a huge round of applause for James Walker, Matt Montgomery and Patrick McVeigh.
Well done, guys.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Really cool.